This is we read paper and we read paper. This is On Truth and Instrumentalisation by Chris Henry in the London Journal of Critical Thought back in 2016. So as always, we read. I try to explain it as best I can, and try to figure it out. I'm not endorsing this. I'm still on warning from like Twitch and YouTube about bullshit. So like, I am not endorsing anything I'm reading here. We're evaluating it, and I'll tell you if it's bad. But like, it's not my fault. So and here we go. And as always, feel free to ask questions along the way. I will do my best to answer your question. My first time reading it too. So here we go. I can't speak already. I've already lost my brain. So, 2 issues were raised in discussion in the 2015 London Conference in Critical Thought that I will address here. The first issue was that of the you know what I could do? I'm going to try something. I'm going to go into I'm going to get out of just chatting, and we're going to do reading and writing. There's a reading category now. Writing and reading category. So I'm going to go into the writing and reading category. So this category has writing and reading in it. I wonder if I'm going to get more people. I don't know. So 2 issues were raised in discussion at the 2015 Reading Rainbow category, exactly, London Conference in Critical Thought that I will address here. The first issue was that of the nature of truth as a source of legitimation. Not legitimization, legitimation. So that's interesting already. So nature of truth as legitimation. In his paper, Jones showed that Schmidt's political theology conceptualizes political legitimacy as derived from secularized theological concepts. Okay? So a lot of times what happens in the history of philosophy, and you'll see this if you are looking a little bit, is that there was an idea of God, and God has all these properties. Then all of a sudden, a few hundred years later, mind. There's a theory of mind, and mind has almost all the same, mind represents or has all the same sort of positions in the theory that God used to. So it stopped being God that was able to give you rationality, the spark of life. It became mind that gave you rationality and the spark of life. And so God was replaced by the concept of mind. And so this isn't, this sort of like secularized theological concept is not a crazy thing to be saying. It's not like our ideas now came from nowhere. A lot of times we are borrowing ideas and they're not so different. Like, so if you think like, oh, the old religious, medievals had no idea what they were talking about, we're so far different from them. Not true. We have updated their ideas, but like the theories are not so different. Really are not. Okay. We do know more now, though, of course. Yet, Jones reinjects the theological into these secularized concepts. For him, politics is constituted by a leader who appeals to a legitimating power as justification for their leadership, whilst those under this leadership also necessarily submit to the same authority. Jones develops his theory of politics in this article by conceptualizing truth as a disruption of certain absolutes by political leaders, founded upon this secularized yet nonetheless theological idea of legitimation. So in this idea, kings used to rule because they had divine right. So they had the right to rule by God. Then later on, you get political leaders. They don't claim God is why they are allowed to rule, but they say they have some quality of leadership or the mandate from some other power. And so is that other power actually acting in any way different than God did in the old sort of king who was, the king who said God gave them the right to rule? A lot of times, no. And so it's just something that was God. Now we're saying it's some institution that's granting you the right, but in theory, in terms of the abstract theory, they play the exact same role. Okay. As presented at the conference, my reading of Badiou places him in a similar position to Jones, whereas Jones used both explicitly Christian and secular theological terminology to locate political authority in the divine. Badiou uses a particular configuration of mathematics, specifically the ZFC, Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory, and they drop off the Cantor. So why is it ZF or is it ZFC, motherfucker? Get it right if you're going to do that. So the word theological here means like an unquestionable authority. Well, that's how it was back in the day. If like you had God's mandate, then you had unquestionable authority. Now, could you say like the democratic process of election in the United States is kind of like God's mandate? Probably not, but some people will argue that like, Trump got elected because God wanted him to get elected, and so it's playing the exact same role. It's not an unquestionable authority. They just think this is the authority. Oh shit, Badu too? Yeah, exactly. K-Par says the actors change, the structure is the same. Yeah, so this is so Badu is using a particular configuration of mathematics to locate truth in the void. Yeah, so mathematics, according to Badu, is a language of ontology itself and articulates truth within the world as a ruptural break from the standard order of things. Okay, so it's some sort of mathematical structure of the universe. We were talking about this before, Neoplatonism. Not, like I said, people believe this. Like, this is not the craziest idea in terms of, like, a lot of people believe this sort of shit. And that's okay. Both authors therefore wish to explain the axiomatic by which we can tell the truth of situations, but cannot explain the truth of this condition of truth. Yeah. So if you want to explain why someone's in charge, you can say, well, it's God's fault. Or if you want to say why this is the case, you say, well, this is how the math of the universe works out. And that's just how the universe is. This is the structure of the mathematical laws that govern the universe. That's just how it is. Now, you can't then question that sort of thing. That is the condition of truth. That's God's will, or that is just the laws of nature. And that's the end of your discussion. And that's what this condition of truth is right here. You can't explain that. You just accept it. The first problem can be condensed thus: what can tell us the truth of God or the truth of mathematics upon which so much justification relies? The second issue raised was that of circularity, or the self-referential nature of truth claims. Jones was asked whether or not the necessity on the part of the truth teller to proclaim the legitimacy of God undermined the idea of God as sacred. Big shiny truth philosophy. Yes. By what light do you know the sun? Yes. It's the light of the sun you know the sun. It seems that the secular justification of the authority of God is, in fact, a profane justification that simply presupposes the divine authority of God. Yeah, by what light do you know the sun? By what way do you know God except for the divine authority of God? It just simply presupposes it, as K-Pars brings up. Likewise, when Badu argues that the subject plays fidelity to an event in order to actualize its lessons in subsequent situations as truths, he presupposes the mathematical conditions of the event. Yeah, so when you play out the math, you've already assumed the math. How it is. It played out according to the laws of nature, according to the math, but that presupposes that there were mathematical laws. Both authors therefore conceptualize truth through circular reasoning. Truth is articulated by one who proclaims fidelity to a presupposition, that is God or mathematics, which then authorizes their proclamation post hoc. My argument, however, as an alternative for Badu's and Jones's, was also challenged for its circularity. In my conference paper, I argued that concepts are truthful for Deleuze as long as they express an event, where an event is understood as a qualitative or quantitative change in the state of affairs. On this basis, when Deleuze joins Nietzsche in claiming that objects do not exist separately from their expression, he removes the mind-body duality that underpins conventional theories of truth and the alethetic theories of both Jones and Badu. Yeah, so these alethetic would mean truthless. So you just assume God is there. And so it's got neither truth nor untruth. It's alethetic. For Deleuze, neither the mind nor language, and therefore truths, refer, cohere, nor correspond to a mind-independent world. Instead, following Spinoza, the world and mind are expressions of a single univocal event, and it makes no sense that one can adequately refer to another. Yeah, so this is a monolithic. Things just happen all together. So it's a monolithic, and there is no like underlying structure. So you're not relying on God. You're not relying on math. It's just monolithic. Because Deleuze discounts a mind-independent world in favor of an event-oriented ontology, which treats mind and world as aspects of events, however, I was asked to account for how any claim to truth could be made of things, including truth itself, that are constantly changing as they are expressed by the event. How, in other words, can Deleuze account for the truth of the production of truth? Yeah, so if everything's just this monolithic thing, how do you get truth out of the monolith? It's just all the event, whatever the fuck the event is. Don't ask me. I'm just saying that is like the monolithic. It's just events are primary. And so how do you get truth out of an event if it's primary? Where is the truth? It's just the event. Okay. In response to these two problems, this paper makes two claims. Firstly, it shows that thinking the truth of any particular concept, such as politics, is founded upon an instrumental logic that betrays the truth of a situation. Truth cannot be thought of something, for this would fall back into a theory of correspondence. Instead, truth is a function of thought. In order to make this move to a functional concept of truth, I outlined Dewey's criticism and two important repercussions of dogmatically instrumental philosophy. Oh boy, this paper might be over my head. Yeah, but we're still in the beginning. Okay, it's fine. This is getting into continental philosophy, so we're shifting around truth and objects and things like that. I will try to explain. Just try to ask me questions. If you don't get something, I'll do my best. But you have to understand, we're not defining truth in the usual way. We're going to say, look, there are events in the world. That's what the world is made up of events. How do you talk about truths? It's well, that's derivative of the event. That's it. We're just saying, look, what is in the world are events now. My ethics professor once said about the truth good is that it must be useless, otherwise its use would be for some higher good. Ultimate good would be useless. Yeah, and this is another ancient argument. Forget who, there's an argument against God. How would you know the truth of God? Otherwise it would be useful to proving God. You'd just have to, then God wouldn't be good. It'd be useful for something. And then it wouldn't be God because it would be useful. Yeah. So that is an old ancient argument, and it's got long legs, K-pars. Yeah, so the ultimate reality just must be. It may not be good for anything, it just has to exist. And so if you think there's something beyond that, then you have to do a lot of work explaining what is beyond everything that exists. And how would you even do such things? You would need a very strong metaphysics to say, well, this is everything exists, and then everything that we understand exists for a different reason. How would you know anything like that? We only have experience in our world. So you need a lot of theory to make that sort of move. Yeah. Okay. Author says, I then show how Badiou's philosophy is indeed guilty of instrumentalization, but emphasizes that his prioritization of truth is nevertheless important to maintain. The second claim of this paper makes is that the criticism of Deleuze's concept of truth is circular is misplaced, as it is founded on the assumption that Deleuze conceptualizes the truth of objects. Instead, I show that for Deleuze, truth is not a property of an object, but of its production. To reach this conclusion, I develop what I call Dewey's account of pragmatic instrumentalization, as opposed to the dogmatic instrumentalization he criticizes. Into Deleuze's conceptualis. Okay, so this is another conceptualization. I don't know if there's a typo or just a neologism. Conceptualization of truth as the process of making sense of our precarious world. I conclude by making some provisional remarks that Deleuze's pragmatic account of truth paves the way for an ethics that is not founded on truths it cannot explain, for example, God or mathematics, but as an ongoing subversive practice. Yeah, things are exploding. These nuts, I guess. Instrumentalisation. In Experience in Nature, John Dewey argues that, hitherto, all philosophy has been constituted around the principle of instrumentalisation, whereby concepts are developed as part of an attempt to understand the world in service of a cause. Importantly for Dewey, prefiguring Althusser's concept of denegation, this cause is rarely admitted to be part of the process of instrumentalisation. He shows this philosophical lineage tracing back to Platonic inspiration and the appropriation of artisanship by ancient philosophy. Yeah, so this is going back into how we are looking well, what are we doing? We're doing this for some reason. And if you're doing always philosophy for some reason, that's going to color your philosophy. There's nothing else to that. By instrumentalizing the world with both Platonic ideal forms and Aristotle's efficient and final causes, objects are appropriated by philosophy in an attempt to reduce the world to a set of properties which both Plato and Aristotle could articulate to suit their political goals. As developed below, the point I want to make here is not that it is necessarily an issue to appropriate thought for a purpose, but that that purpose must not be dogmatic. Yeah, so why are you talking about philosophy? Are you trying to do something political with it? But this author says, look, as long as you're not being dogmatic about it, you're just not assuming things from the get-go, it's okay to like use the philosophy for some purpose. The upshot of dogmatic intellectual appropriation of the world is twofold. Tenderi says, the good thing about the new category is that you appear in the first row now. That's what I was thinking. I wonder if I'm going to pick anyone up by being at the top as opposed to just chatting, which is a huge category. So. You're the top streamer who has like 90 views, so you're like top 5. Yeah. So yeah, like I was looking at it last week, and you know, there was one person with like 100 and something, and then everyone was like less than that. And like, you know, thanks to the very nice raids, I think from Globus into Ivan into here, I'm like doing, you know, better than I usually am for my numbers. So that would put me closer to the top. Globus says that's why you moved to science and tech. Yeah, I mean, there is a strategy to being on Twitch. So yeah. So yeah. Okay. Now, where was I? The upshot of dogmatic intellectual appropriation of the world is twofold. Firstly, as Sleeper... So, someone... It's funny that someone's called Sleeper. But yeah, as Sleeper puts it, this appropriation is the root cause of the dualisms that litter the train of Western thought from Plato to positivism, driving conceptual wedges between matter and form, body and mind, fact and value. Were it not for the contemplation of eternal truths dimly perceived as somehow transcending and governing the confusing world of the live creature, he argues we could evolve our first philosophy from the logic of experience, from the analysis of existential problems and their meaning and their means of resolution. To be fair, I was not expecting a sweaty to lose in versus Baidu paper, but this is scratching my itch. Good. Well, there you go. Yeah, Ralph Sleeper wrote on The Pragmatist. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I don't know I do not know this. It's just it was a funny name. I saw Sleeper from like some other thing that was going on, so it just confused me. In other words, Dewey accuses the entire tradition of Western metaphysics of setting out from first principles that it cannot or will not account for, and the resultant construction of abstract claims upon false dualities, such as dialectics. Secondly, the instrumentalization of the intellect serves a management function, with the mode of management matching the mode of instrumentalization. In service of this intellectual appropriation, as Dewey argues, self-evidence ceases to be important for developing new ideas, and if new phenomena destabilize the existing philosophical postulates, they are cast aside, represented, or disregarded in favor of efficient management. This is not a crazy thought, that a lot of philosophy is about organizing the way you think about the world. And there are better and worse ways to organize things, including thought. And so it's like the idea that there's a organizational tradition in Western philosophy is not crazy. And the idea that there might be better ways to like organize things is like, well, is that a philosophical problem? That's a major problem of metaphysics. As I was talking about earlier, like that whole structure of like logic as like maximal descriptive power, and then like there's a whole lot of metaphysical space before reality. Well, that whole lot of space can be reorganized in a lot of ways. Domesticating your own intellect, break out of your cage. Exactly. Well, that's it. Like I can only show you the door. You must step through it. Like open your mind, Neo. It's like, well, what does that actually mean? It's like you can say all these sort of like little things. It's like, does it actually help? But like, again, you can frame the history of philosophy according to this. Is it going to get you anywhere? I don't know. Is this maybe a function of the way we've framed philosophy, that this seems like a good idea? Maybe this doesn't even get us out. Maybe this is just a false way to go that the history of philosophy has set up for us that is really just a dead end. You're going to break your rusty cage and run. Exactly, yeah. So, yeah. I'll tell you, from all the philosophy I've done, I have a hugely, and I mean hugely, regimented and reorganized my thought over the years. And I'm not even like kidding, like a little bit. Like, it's massively been reorganized multiple times. So, like, it's just what I've been doing. Okay. To support his claim, Dewey highlights mankind's experiences of existentially precarious world where the precarity of existence must be accounted for metaphysically to the same extent as its stability. So this is exactly what I was saying. Like, so we have a existentially precarious world. We're in this weird world where we don't know what the fuck is going to go on. And so we have to organize our thoughts to explain what the fuck is going on. Precarity is not an empirical observation. Dewey would not argue, for example, that 1929 is any more precarious than 1928, but a metaphysical claim. Yeah. So we don't know the reasons for our existence. That's it. Situations that individuals find themselves in are, for Dewey, not wholly comprehensible because they are presented to the individual by a partial encounter. For example, a student's experience of a classroom might be constituted by the interaction with their teacher, their peers, and the classroom's geography, but this would only be a contingent and local presentation of the larger situation, which would include the government targets for syllabuses and university budgets. For Dewey, then, an individual encounters a situation into which they inquire. This encounter forms the antecedent conditions for this inquiry, yet the situation that the individual encounters extends much further than is presented to the individual. It is this extension into what is not presented to the individual that constitutes the situation's precarity, whilst the learned intellect imminently constitutes the situation's stability. Yeah, so you're always involved in more things than you know. Sure. Unreal says, I'm not used to Dewey being explicated in continental language, so this is weird, but I'm not hearing anything that sounds wrong. Yeah, I mean, this person seemingly understands their Dewey as far as I understand it. But like, yeah, it's in a weird setting. So which is cool. The fact that the Continentals have appropriated some pragmatic philosophy, I think is good. So like, I think it's cool. The encounter between thought and a situation is important for Deleuze's conceptualization of truth and will be expanded on below. But first, what is the problem with the dogmatic intellectualization of the world as undertaken by Badiou and Jones? Okay, so we're living in this world what is always extended farther than what our little slice is. That's not a crazy thought. That's an ancient thought. Many traditions always say, look, you experience one bit of the world, but it's always a lot more is going on. So like there's the ancient story about the five blind guys who like find a elephant, and one guy gets the trunk, one guy gets the ear, one guy gets like the side of the elephant, one guy gets like the tusk, and so it's like everyone is experiencing a bit of the elephant, but none of them really gets the whole elephant. That's how it goes. So yeah, and that's the precarity. But again, we make sense of our world by like what we think about it, and that's what we have to like get hold of ourselves. So like the guy who says an elephant is like a tree because he's feeling the leg of the elephant, that makes sense to that person, and that stabilizes that person's thought. Now, is an elephant like a tree? Well, in some respect, they are, but not really. So that's the precarity again. All right. Now, the five guys make elephant burgers. Yeah, exactly. With lots of fries. All right. Dogma. The weight of Badiou's political prescription relies entirely upon their rational axiomatic subtraction from both doxa, opinion, and the sensible. Using the mathematical apparatus of set theory, Badiou's intellectual project is to militantly pursue the severing of the infinite from the one, making it impossible to reappropriate the former, thus affirming the pure oneless infinity of the multiple as such. Okay, so they're just doing a monism. I have no idea what I just said. It's a monism. You're making everything into one infinity or something. Put in Dewey's terms, Badiou wishes to affirm the precarity as that which conditions our potentially infinite ability to act as we may want were it not concealed by our petty human sensibilities. Five Guys must be blind to have such high prices. Yeah, I don't like going there because it's expensive. Like, it's a good burger, though. Badiou's revelation proceeds by reversing the Platonic priority of the one over the multiple and the infinite, demonstrating how the infinite can be accessed despite the one. So in certain situations, the presented order of things is ruptured in an event which allows the faithful to act in accordance with the teachings of that event. Yeah, so you experience one thing, whatever that event is, and then you expand out from there. That's like the one thing you get to explain and understand, and your brain just sorts of like expands out into the world that way with whatever experience that event gives you. Okay, it is here that Badu's project looks remarkably similar to Jones, who also thinks that proclaiming fidelity to an inaccessible realm from which truth can be articulated is a necessary part of a political account of legitimacy. However, as others have also noted, Badu's ontology also relies upon epistemological presuppositions that both reduce and secularize his conception of the infinite. Those distinctions that Badu uses in order to elucidate his ontology, those of truth and doxa, so that's truth in opinion, intelligible, sensible, and is not, are denegated ideal postulates of that condition his ontology before being reintroduced as symptoms of it. So Badu's ontology does fall to Dewey's criticism of instrumentalization. Badu instrumentalizes thought in a circular argument which declares that this instrumentalization is a product of the ontology it specifies. Yeah, so if you're doing metaphysics, you say, well, this is how it is, and then because of the way it is, this is how it is. So he's broken things down according to like truth and opinion. And it's like, well, okay, if you are starting off from truth and opinion, you've already prefigured the way you're looking at the world between truth and opinion, intelligible, sensible, and is not. What the heck, Badu? You changed all the definitions around. What he does. I mean, he's a philosopher. You change some definitions, see how things fall. The circular problem of Badu's mathematical ontology can be put more generally. That's how Badu do? Yes. Badu do. Any philosophy which purports to tell the truth of something, including the world itself, or the propositional form of a truth statement, instantiates an ontological duality between truth as the truth of something and anything else which is not that something. Yeah, so if you're going to say, well, here's a hand, well, that states that there is a truth that this is a hand, and it separates it from all the other things in the world that it might have been. But like, yeah, this is a hand, and so then it means it's not everything else also. As a result, it must also admit to not being able to tell the truth of what is not that thing. Yeah, so if everything else is not the hand, you also, if you're looking at the hand, you can't explain what the rest of the world is. Indeed, the four main theories of truth, coherence, correspondence, pragmatist, and deflationary, as well as Badu's and Jones's theory, make claims about either the truth of the form of propositions, sentences, or claims, or of the world. This is a non-black, non-raven, yes. Because each theory specifies its own remit, it cannot explain the truth of what it does not specify, and, most importantly, this includes the ability to tell the truth of the mind-world differentiation that is implicit and often explicit in all of the theories. Yeah, so again, once you start doing this sort of thing, you get a metaphysics or ontology to go with it. The fact that you think it's a legit thing to say, well, here's a hand, or anything for that matter, you are making background assumptions. It just is that way. Behold, Plato's hand. Yeah. Well, Moors. I'm very Moorian. That's why I use these examples. Okay. G.E. Moore, for those who don't know. Furthermore, the mind-world split necessitates that the mind either form a perspective of the world, such as in a correlationist theory of truth, or form judgments of perspectives, such as in a coherence theories. According to this necessity, traditional theories of truth result in an unreconcilable differentiation between different truth claims, where different subjects will have different perspectives or judgments from each other. Yeah, so if you say something and I say something, then we may contradict each other, but how do we actually adjudicate that? Although Badu rightly avoids traditional propositional theories of truth, in his case the circularity is to be found within his truth procedure, that is, the distinction between the truth of non-being, the void, and not the truth of being, the sensible opinion. Badu states what the truth can be told of, and proceeds to elaborate how we may do this. In all cases, however, it is hard to accept theories of truth that limit the remit of their application by prescription. If the concept of truth is to be held onto, what is needed is an ambitious account of truth that can account for everything, including its own account of truth. Yeah, so how are you going to do a non-circular account of truth? Everyone has to, if they're going to tell you what it is, then in some sense you always think it's going to be limited unless you, like, it's maximally general, but then they haven't said anything. So it's very, very hard to give a maximally general theory of truth without making some distinctions that will seem arbitrary. Very difficult. Okay. It is often supposed that contemporary philosophy shies away from conceptualizing the truth if it does not reject the concept entirely for precisely the problems associated with the circularity mentioned above. Yeah, so interesting. Weird, like the feminist post-structuralism and discourse analysis is the footnote here. It's like, is that really the place you need to reference to say that philosophy avoids truth for this sort of reason? Maybe it's a great reference. I don't know. It's just not what I was expecting to look at. Feminist post-structuralism. Maybe. It might be more productive to focus instead on concepts such as equality, representation, or stability to ground political claims. Yeah, it's like something more tangible. Yet, as Rorty confirms, philosophers rarely say that there is no truth, even if they are reported to do so. I'm kind of on that side. I don't like talking about truth. Like, I don't find it very helpful. I don't even say there is truth. I'm saying the world exists as such, but like, who the fuck knows what that is? Like, that doesn't say anything. As contemporary philosophy has attempted to move beyond dogmatic metaphysics towards contingent structures, truth must also, to a greater or lesser extent, be a functional part of contingent structures. Indeed, this might explain why philosophies that do not focus on truth as the articulation and exploration of structures understandably take center stage in a place of detailed scrutiny of how structures are constituted. And like, so, look, I know I've got a lot of science-oriented people in chat. Think about this. You have truth of science. You don't have truth in general. You have the truth of what is given to us by our scientific knowledge. That's what we're talking about here. You do not talk about truth in the universe. You talk about what we can actually understand to be true. And that's what it is here. So there's a structure given to this already. So these are, exploration of structures understandably takes center stage. So that's what we're talking about. The structure of scientific truth, structure of scientific revolutions, science as structure, and that's where truth lives. Thank you for the follow. Olive Rar. Ovelvar? Olive Rar. K-Par says, I think even science has banned positive claims, just rejecting null claims if evidence is favorable. Yeah, science is like understanding that it's not completely, it still has a lot of, even the structures are very limiting in science, but it's still way more, there's still more structure to science at all than there is just, once you get out of that. Science doesn't know everything, no. I mean, it's why we do philosophy. It's like there's still these weird questions we do not understand or how to answer yet. So we ask other questions. But then science knows it doesn't know everything, otherwise it would stop. True. But like, again, science does certain things well, and then there's other stuff it doesn't figure out, and we work on that until we can make it into a science. And then like that's how we get some new science sometimes. And it's like we're investigating. How you been, Vipers? I hope you're well. Yeah. I was wondering if someone would repost that meme I posted in Aris's Discord. It looked like you did it within a minute, or you beat me to it, and like it was just me and you posting the same meme at the same time. I don't know. But yeah, so this is the point. It's that we, most of the time in our contemporary world, we're not talking about the truth of the entire universe or the way things are in the world. We're talking about truth in a system. And that system, again, is mediated somehow. Like when we say science, there are statistics that go along with that. You can't just say anything is a scientific truth. It isn't. Okay. However, if Dewey is correct to argue that thought instrumentalizes a precarious world, then truth must be seen as a concept with which to understand how different and changing structures adequately instrumentalize it. The truth of the matter would then not be a description of the world under any one particular transcendental description of truth. What's up, Adam? Instead, truth might be thought of as a functional component of the sense that understands the world, which appropriates and creates different structures as necessary. Okay. Dogmatic instrumentalization becomes pragmatic instrumentalization. This process whereby the subject creates appropriate and adequate structures for its use is what Dewey calls an inquiry into the world and Deleuze calls apprenticeship. Okay, so the more you start asking questions, the more you get to talk about the truth of different areas. So in inquiring or in like learning how to do something as an apprentice, you get to understand where the truth is in that stuff, but it is part of that process. Deleuze's idea of apprenticeship can be thought of as a practice of living truthfully in the world. Okay, I wouldn't have said living truthfully because this seems really circular. It's as living, you'd want to go with authentically or something like that. Even though they probably want to avoid the Heideggerian, they'd probably say like living within the world, something in this world. Like this whole sentence right here is extremely dangerous. But like, yeah, this is what they're doing. A lot of metaphysics in this one sentence. As opposed to Badiou's and Jones's conception of truth, which rejects the truth of the world in favor of the truth found outside it. So yeah, you're not talking about the truth of God, you're talking about the truth within the world and how you interact with the world. Deleuze wants us to affirm the world, yet Deleuze is hostile to traditional theories of truth, and this is particularly clear when he argues that the mistake of philosophy is to presuppose within us a benevolence of thought, of a natural love of truth. This motif, often repeated throughout Deleuze's work, is a warning against those who assume that thought inherently leads to what is good for the one who thinks. Thought is not essentially good for the individual because it is not totalizing. It does not contain all that is necessary to know the truth of the world. Were this to be the case, the adequacy of a thought to the world would necessarily be de jure and not simply a question of fact. In other words, providing that thought and therefore truthful statements contain with them the aptitude to tell the truth is a Sisyphean task. Every truth claim must be bolstered by the theory of truth that grounds it, the rules of which, in turn, must be reevaluated in terms of the new claim. Okay, so what the fuck is going on here? It's saying, look, we don't actually get the truth when we think we are because we're only getting one little slice. The truth is always bigger, and we get to it by, exploring the world. But when we say the truth in any one theory, that cuts off our exploration. At that point, we have stopped exploring. Live truthfully, and you can't delude. Yes, no losing. Lots of snake eating its tail in this one. Yep. You can have a little truth as a treat. Yeah, basically. Yeah. Would have been a great paper for the I Know Real Number one from last time. Yeah. It is, however, tautologous to suggest that a theory can test its claim according to its own terms. Yeah, because that would be to hold it outside of the system as a test. Instead of relying on a benevolent and totalizing image of thought to find the truth, Deleuze's conceptualization of truth is functional, and Deleuze argues that the truth is betrayed by involuntary signs. Okay, so again, you get the way the world is by, learning stuff within it. But then you can't talk about it, and that's why you have involuntary signs. You just have pushback about the way the world is. Does that count as truth? Well, you can't say that. So it's like, this is a very weird thing because you are now interacting with the world, but you can't talk about the truth that you experience in it. You just get it via the way the world sort of, interacts with you. Yeah. What does it mean for truth to be betrayed by signs? See, betrayed. You can't even talk about it in signs. In order to know truth, Deleuze argues that we must first experience the violent effect of a sign, and the mind must be forced to seek the sign's meaning. Yeah, so something is happening to us. A violent effect. Something. And then you have to work to figure it out. For Deleuze, the individual encounters situations through four kinds of signs that exist in differential relations to each other. Worldly signs, those of meanings; amorous signs, those that impel one to become sensitive to something; sensuous signs, those that give one joy or sadness; and artistic signs, signs of pure affectivity. I have no fucking clue what that shit is. The encounter for Deleuze forces the individual to understand a situation, and this understanding is created in part by the affectivity of signs, and in part by the sign's relation to thought. Yeah, so it does something to you. I don't know what, but it does something in different ways. There is no truth of the world in itself, as this implies that there are objects a priori of sense to find the truth of. Instead, for Deleuze, sense is true if it has been created by the individuals in synthesis with their previous understanding and what they have learned from their encounter with the world. Yeah, so you are moving yourself through the world. It affects you in some ways, and that's what we're calling truth now. The way the world and you interact and affect each other. I think Deleuze is working with a Spinozistic framework of effect. Maybe. They mentioned that earlier, that there was something Spinozistic about this. I don't know enough Spinoza to say one way or the other. To explain this, Deleuze uses the melancholic example of a man who has been lied to by his partner, asking who would seek the truth if he had not first suffered the agonies inflicted by the beloved's lies. Yeah, so like, why are you going looking for the way the world is unless something happened to you? The deceived is impelled to inquire into the truth, not of the lies that he has been told, for these constitute only part of the situation, but rather of his wretchedness, that is his situation. K-Part says Deleuze has a work on Spinoza, like a study on them, which was influential in his work. Okay, cool. Did not know the history. Thank you. Latvian says, for someone who has no formal philosophy education, more into logic, I'm glad I intuit the navel-gazy tail-eatingness. Yes. Well, a lot of philosophy, of course, as we've always said, is written for other philosophers. It's not written for the general public, and so this is a response paper to a conference paper, and so it's like, well, we've got multiple layers of like reflecting on oneself at this point. Yes. So Deleuze's sense of the situation, his truth, has been, the character's truth has been betrayed by the encounter, which has constituted his melancholy as part of the situation. Yeah, so when you're sad that you got lied to, then you have to go do something because you feel like shit. That's fair. It just kind of makes sense to me. It sticks. Well, that's good. If any of the philosophy you like it and it sticks, it's like, well, that's nice. Maybe this is the stuff that you like, and there are more things written about it that maybe you will find one day. But like, this is the thing that happens. There's a lot of philosophy. Do not waste your time on philosophy you don't like. Only read the philosophy that is interesting to you, because there's always more. There's just a lot of it. So yeah. So if something sticks, remember that at least you might like something in that area. And it may not be the Badiou, it might not be the Deleuze, it might not be the Dewey, it might be this dude who's writing this, Chris Henry, who the fuck knows. But like, just keep that in mind. In this regard, Deleuze's idea of truth avoids the circularity found in Badiou's and Jones's idea. Truth is not a truth of something, that is the world or void, and is therefore not open to questions about its limited remit, but is a function of making sense in the world. Worst philosophy sales pitch. True. I know what I'm saying too. It's like, yeah, I knew that. I've said that before, and I've thought about that. It is a function of making sense in the world. Yes, yeah, so you just get truth as like a hanger-on or an outlier or something. This is sort of like an epiphenomenal truth. You're getting truth as something that happens as a result of other stuff that are way more important. And that's what we're calling truth here. So this is even kind of deflationary. Latvian says, I've only half paid attention, but I was reading a different essay, wanted to put in the Discord. Yeah, go right ahead. Okay. All right, so we are just about done. One more page. So, ethically truthful. Truth, according to Deleuze, appears to be so far removed from the four traditional theories of truth as to disqualify it as being truth at all, or at least, at the very least, so obscure as to render it redundant. So what is to be learned from it? There are 3 points to be taken from Deleuze's conceptualization of truth. Yeah, this is like epiphenomenal. You move through the world, you bump into the life, and then you get like some understanding of truth through your bouncing around the world. But like, that's all the truth is the bouncing around. So it's like, that's not anything anyone else means when they say truth. So what are the points? The first is that Deleuze invites us to learn. For Deleuze, we are apprentices in the world to the extent that we learn about ourselves embodied within precarious situations. Thus, when Deleuze argues that the condition of truth is not opposed to the false, but to the absurd, he encourages us to literally make sense of otherwise absurd situations. Yeah, so the idea is that you're bouncing around the world, you run into shit, you have to change, and even if you think it's absurd, there's something to be learned about yourself or the interaction at that point, which makes sense. Like, how do you deal with a world that you don't understand? Maybe you can adapt, and maybe you can figure out a better way to live. And that would be, once you figure that out, then you would have some sort of little bit of truth gained in that encounter. Understanding of situations are not fixed before they are encountered, so frittering one's life away as a result of being lied to by one's love is not necessary. Yeah, you can do other stuff, of course. Instead, one might creatively affirm one's own place with respect to the liar. Not all lies are bad, and learning the truth of the situation makes sense of the lie. Secondly, truth is non-propositional, although it may incorporate propositions within it. For Deleuze, propositions only tell a partial truth, the truth of the proposition, which amounts to no truth at all, and he reminds us that the truth has no need to be spoken in order to be manifest. All right, yeah. So the truth is out in the world, and you don't have to say anything about it. It's just like how you interact with stuff. Not out in the world. It's given to you in your interactions. And so talking about it is sort of after the fact. Thirdly, and most importantly, truth is both ethical and subversive. Through his critique of dogmatic a priori and transcendental claims, Deleuze encourages individuals to take an active role in their own lives in order to remain open to the encounter. K-Pars, yeah, exactly. Phenomenology of truth. So, like, yeah, that's what I was thinking too at this point. This is not what other people mean by truth. This is what people would mean by authentic encounters in the world, usually. Some sort of existential existence where you are open to the way the world is. Now, Deleuze, I'm sure, knows all this and would be rejecting that characterization, but it just seems like that's what everyone else would be calling it. Deleuze is calling what other people might say is phenomenology of experience. That's what Deleuze is calling truth here. Okay, so you're open to the encounter, open to the truth. That's basically what it is. One must hold attempts to coerce, dominate, control, or lie to us to account, not for the sake of necessarily rejecting these attempts for the sake of it, but to ensure that they benefit us. Yeah, you want to experience the things in the world so that you might understand the world better. You don't want to just discount them. So mindful, so demure, yeah. Very contemporary shit. There's definitely a Zoomer who wrote this. Deleuze encourages us to make sense of dogmatic ideas, and in doing so, think of ways we might resist their effects on us. Deleuze's conceptualization of truth clearly flies in the face of traditional theories, Badiou's mathematical truth procedures, and Jones' Schmittian accounts of a political theology of truth, eschewing their penchant for organizational and top-down regulation of thought. When politics is presented as a precarious situation to which solutions must be found, Deleuze's theory of truth prompts the individual to problematize its apparent obviousness and pragmatically instrumentalize thought to make sense of the situation. And we're done. So now we get to rate the paper. As always, what we do here is anyone in chat is free to rate the paper. You can rate it with my emotes. You have to spell them and capitalize correctly. If you thought this was fun and made your brain dance, you give it a brain dance. If you thought this was talk about existential or artistic drama, you give it a Nog scream. Ouroboros, Nagoro for deep ancient ideas. And everyone is free to use any of these. Like, you can do it. These are better TTV emotes, so you can just, like, everyone can, like, you know, post them in chat. If you can't see them, you can install the better TTV add-on, but you can see them in chat below. So yeah, so we're getting a brain dance and Nog navel, so there's a little bit navel gazing. It's only for academics. Yeah, a lot of complicated sort of words and structures in this. Yeah, the knife is for slicing and dicing arguments. Nog turd, all style, no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. And you can also use the global vote yay and vote nay emotes just for like generic thumbs up, thumbs down. And my vote meh if you think it's kind of in the middle. So thank you, Anti-Snowman, Laughing Jesus, and K-Pars for putting your review in. And I make a kind of a number out of these. So everything like on the top makes the overall score up, and everything on the bottom makes it go down, and the vote magos makes everything get towards the middle. So what am I thinking about this? I thought this was fun. I'm going to give it a brain dance because, you know, anytime I think that we read continental philosophy and I don't think it's terrible, it was fun, like for me. So I'm giving it a brain dance because I thought for this sort of thing, it was a good time. Yeah, then we've got, it was existential as fuck to me because, like, that's really what it was. I don't know if this was so much about truth, but, like, it was trying to be about truth, so it's going to get an Ouroboros. So this is really, like, a meld of the phenomenology and the truth sort of thing. Unreal Brian says, they feel like they smashed things together, and I'm not sure what came out of the collision. We'll probably have to reread to see if the impression remained. Yeah. So it's like, this was a lot of ideas. So it's going to get a vote meh also from me. Because I don't know if it's like good philosophy. I'm going to give it 2 vote mehs. So it's just like, it's really in the middle somewhere, but like it had some fun ideas. It kind of was like, oh yeah, we're not going to actually have a theory of truth. We're going to have, it's really calling our experience with the world this, like I said, an epiphenomenal truth, that we get like a shade of truth in our experiences with the world, but whatever we call the truth, like that doesn't matter. So yeah, Tyndareus gave it a meh, a navel gazing, and a grapes. Yeah. Did this make big claims that shriveled up? What was it supposed to do? What did they say they were doing? Yeah. Well, I don't know if it shriveled up. I mean, they made their claims, but like, were their claims worth making? Maybe is the problem. Unreal says, I appreciate bringing doing into places not normally seen, so you're gonna add a yay. Okay, go right ahead. Yeah, so it's like, and if you like put things that like it'll kind of average each other out. Put stuff. Something about political theory I originally thought, I don't know. Yeah, whatever it is. So let's see. What did I rate? I gave it a dance, Ouroboros, a scream, and a double meh. That seems right. Like, it probably deserves a nog navel as well, but I mean, I thought it was fun. So, yeah, because you know it hand waved at like some politics. This is yeah, I don't know. Whatever. It's all good. Yeah, I'm almost thinking of grapes plus a yay kind of mind. Yeah, but not quite grapes. Feel free to rate it as you feel, like just however you want. This is in the grand scheme of things. That's all we got here. Spam the emotes. Just go ahead and spam them. You can always just sort of do it. Not a big deal. So, up to you. But yeah, I like it. Interesting stuff. The idea that we're making truth into this sort of free rider, this sort of other thing that we're getting in addition to the world is interesting. Yeah. A muddled wine, yeah. So that's fine. And sometimes that's how philosophy is, but the fact that it had this sort of like one idea that I can speak to right there that seems an unusual version of truth, I like that. Like, so that's sort of like, I kind of like that. That's all. All right, so you got 60 seconds left, and then we're gonna get out of here. Yeah. Thanks again, Ivan, for the raid. I appreciate it. I don't know if you're still here, but like, if you got, of course, you never have to stick around, raid and run. Always feel free. Everything's a muddled wine, yeah. And then politicians use a situation rather than dogma to make a decision or something. Well, I don't know exactly how this applies to politics. That's true. That's a good question. That would be in the grapes category. I don't know where the political, it started off talking politics as a way to set up the problem where you were like appealing to something outside the system to get like the legitimization of like your ruling power. But then with the Deleuze, there is nothing outside the system. You're only being able to draw on truth as you move through the world. And so there is no legitimizing power given by the truth anymore. So that's interesting. Adam tuned in. I'm still wondering about the part earlier stated about the person seeking the true nature of reality as what philosophers may do, either by means of rationality or by abduction process, may not necessarily imply that it will get you to the truth due to lack of cognitive ability or inherent flaw in logic or some biased belief, rendering truth to uncertainty and impossibility. Then they go on to give how associative senses, activities, art, grasping of science, a-leafs brings you to truth. Yeah, but their version of truth is so fucking weird compared to everyone else's version of truth that they even have to admit that, yeah, you know what? They even have to admit that other people aren't going to buy that this is the same thing as they were talking about when they were talking about truth. Now, this author is justified in that they're claiming this is Deleuze's position. So it's fine that that they are disagreeing with other authors because they're saying this is what Deleuze said truth actually is. It's this sort of a free rider epiphenomenon that you get moving through the world. So it's like, yeah, it doesn't bring you to the other version of truth. It only brings you to this Deleuzian apprenticeship or pragmatic truth. Sounded philosophically troubled in your opinion? Well, according to everyone else, then yes. You think the politics at the beginning debated you? Yeah, that definitely was framing. They set up the problem a little bit weird. So yeah. Sounded like Deleuze critique of Baidu. Could be. I don't know. Baidu being a Maoist, if you recall correctly, and Deleuze not. Sure. I like the quote where Deleuze sounded pissed about people thinking but not even about being in the ballpark of truth. Well, yeah, if you're going to be that radical about truth, it's like, okay, that this is a new, well, what it feels like to me is a new form of deflationism. You can't talk about truth because it's not something that can be spoken about. It's only something that is like a phenomenon that happens as like a secondary property of being in the world. So you are in the world, you experience things, you experience these events, and then you get like some shade of truth and you can't even properly speak of it. It's like, okay. I was like, yeah. Yeah, there's some spicy French Academy drama between Badiou and Deleuze. Badiou wrote a polemic called Fascism of the Potato to criticize Deleuze of the rhizome. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. So, yeah. There is the old joke about the academy is that the fights are so violent because the stakes are so small.